A couple of folks were asking me how I set up my Raspberry Pi camera Birdbox, and there are a couple of resources out there for setting up cameras in general and even setting up cameras in bird boxes, but I just thought I'd tell you how I did it. I didn't use any pre-put together scripts or anything, but I looked through all those guides and figured out what would work for me. So I already had a Raspberry Pi 2 Model B lying around that I wasn't using, which was great, didn't have to spend any more money. And I went on modmypi.com, which is a great store. It's got everything I want. It's UK based, fast delivery, always well packaged. So I grabbed a Pi case from there, a model I'd used before. It's simple. These guys want to get you by having you spend more money on extra clip-on bits for the case. I don't care about that. I don't care what it looks like. I just care that it works, and it's a good case. It's a good, solid, cheap case with some nice color choices. I went with green. The main attraction is the night vision camera. I knew I needed a camera module that could sense infrared, and I knew I needed some infrared LEDs. And thankfully they have the exact thing you need. So this particular thing, it's the same sensor as the official Pi camera, just on a different board, with two IR LEDs with some nice little like reflector focusy things on them. You can tell I'm professional sounding. I know what I'm talking about, focusy things. All the information's on the page, but all you have to really know is it works a treat. The image quality is exactly what you'd expect. It's just plug and play. You just hook it up as you would any camera. If you look closely, you can see that the two infrared LEDs on either side there are screwed on with a nut and a bolt to the camera board, and that's how power gets to the LEDs. There's no extra power supply. It's all coming from the ribbon cable for the camera, and it's going through those contacts. So you don't even have to use both LEDs if you want. You could just use one. There's also a potentiometer, a tiny little Phillips screw on each of the LEDs, and you can twist that to adjust how bright the LEDs get, because you can see there's a light sensor on both of those LEDs. They will turn off when there is a lot of natural light or another light source because they are not needed, and they will ramp up as required. You can adjust that with the little adjusty thing. I did have an issue where they would flicker. I don't know why. I'm sure someone who knows a lot about electronics would be able to explain what the issue there was. But I had to play with them a little bit because even when I'd set them up fine, I thought they'd be fine. You leave them for 10 minutes running, 15 minutes, and they'd start to flicker. So that wasn't a difficult fix, but that's something that I definitely needed to sort out before I built them into a box where I couldn't really get at them anymore. Another very strange thing about this unit is it gets hot. It gets really hot. The housing around the camera itself, the circuit itself, I put some tape over it to protect it from the elements as best I could while it was in the box. So I touched the thing and holy heck, it burns you. Not an instant burn, but you wouldn't want to have your finger on that thing for more than a second. It gets hot. I've never really played around with the original camera module quite too much in my hands, so maybe that gets hot as well. I don't think it does, but it might. You've got a nice little screw focus there, which is delicate. Not delicate in the sense that it's going to break, but delicate in the sense that you turn it a few millimeters and it goes wildly out if you're trying to focus on something very close to the camera. But it does an excellent job of being able to focus on an entire room or a garden or something 10 inches away from the camera, which is, I don't remember the exact measurement of the Birdbox, but it's something like 10 inches or so. So that's the camera I'm using. It's great. I've read people saying you need a good power supply because of course the infrared LEDs do use up some juice. Also, they look a little bit creepy. I did a time-lapse video of myself sleeping to see if I moved when I slept, because we've all wanted to try it, haven't we? And it was creepy as hell because it's just like these two red eyes in the dark looking at you. They're not super bright to the human eye, and as far as I'm aware, birds can't see infrared, so they're pretty much just seeing the dim red glow that I'm seeing, but it's still kind of creepy. They light a whole room up. I have a picture that I took before I did any focusing stuff, which is why it's blurry as heck, and before I adjusted the LEDs, so I think they could actually get even brighter, but it was just a test of, hey, does this thing work? Please take a picture. And it worked beautifully. If I ever take this thing out of the bird box, I'm going to turn it into a security camera. It's wonderful. Velcro is my friend. I love sticky back Velcro. You can get it really cheap on eBay or where the hell ever, and it will just stick things to things. Here's a picture I hastily took just to show someone my idea about how I was going to keep the camera unit attached to the case. And as you can see, it's just a couple of bits of Velcro. So I can adjust it, I can take it off and stick it back on again, and there's a bit of an elastic band to hold the camera ribbon cable in place. It's coming out through one of the air holes in this case. Nice and simple, basically. So here we can see the bird box itself and the setup with the roof off. On the far left is the inside of the shed, because this is mounted on my father's shed in my parents' garden. So it's just, there's power running out to the shed. I've got a power line adapter, for Ethernet over your power line, and a USB power supply. I've also got another cable there. I decided I didn't want to have to take this out of the bird box, but I might want to connect other USB devices to it at some point. There isn't anything connected to it at the moment, so I ran a USB extension cable, because you never know. Inside the top of the bird box itself, you've got the USB power cable, the Ethernet, and the USB extension cable. You've got the camera unit just poking down as far up as it can be, really, without causing shadows with the LEDs, because if they were higher up, they would start being blocked by the top of the box. So it only pokes through ever so slightly, but it's plenty away from the birds. And again, I just use Velcro everywhere. I made the two little stands, which I could just bend to get it in just the right position, out of PCI slot metal strips, because I've got a million of those lying around from just years and years of having computers, and that works really well. A couple of pliers, bend it how I like. Ooh, that's not quite right, bend it a bit more. And just for safety, because I don't know how waterproof the roof is going to stay over the years, I shoved a bit of OHP printer plastic on top, again with some Velcro in case I want to take it off. I did have an issue with the camera, and this is when I noticed that it was really hot. It was so hot that it melted the glue holding the Velcro to the camera module itself, which was kind of annoying. The Velcro held up but not the glue, so it's assisted by a bit of a rubber band now. It just holds it in place. It's not going to come off, and the glue and the Velcro still sticks it up quite nicely. So that's what's inside the box. You can also see a little view of the inside of the box with the front off, and those Velcro strips are actually on the other side. That was just the lid. I'd had it flipped around the wrong way just to see what it'd be like, but that's kind of gives you an idea of what the birds can see when they look up. I did a bunch of video tests with bits of my mother's ornaments, just because they were small and detailed, to figure out the basic settings for the camera. I already knew that blue tits, which are the birds we're attracting here, like a 6-inch by 6-inch box, so I had a bit of paper to give an idea of what the size of the box would be, and I just tinkered around with resolution and other settings until I got it quite nice. My original idea was to stream the video live to a streaming service like YouTube or Ustream or Twitch, and have that embedded on a web page for people to view. But my internet just isn't that good. I have pretty good internet, and I could get better internet with a better package. But if nothing else, the fact is it's liable to have issues, and I want to be using the internet in the house for other things. I don't want to have it monopolized by this bird box. And also the quality was too degraded for me to be happy with. It didn't feel like it was going to be reliable. and I like things to be able to just run on their own and recover on their own and not have me to ever have to go anywhere near them. So streaming quickly became an issue. I thought, well, I still want to capture video. So I thought, all right, well, what if I stream at a very low quality just so that you can see a live feed, but then also pipe the output to something else? It is possible with, I think it was the Linux command T, I think I used in the end. Basically, I was able to save the video and stream it at the same time, but then I wanted to be able to take still snapshots and upload them at the same time, and it was a whole thing. I pretty much managed to figure it all out, but it felt like a house of cards, and again, it didn't seem reliable enough for me to just leave it alone working. So in the end, I had the idea, okay, well, mainly we want to see the birds. My parents want to see the birds, I want to see the birds, I want to be able to share the birds with the world. I want the video to be of a good quality, and I want it to be automated and something that will work well. So I knew I wouldn't be able to stream video live and also do everything else I wanted to do, but I still wanted to give people the feeling of seeing it live, because while I could upload the video automatically to YouTube at the end of the day and then put a link in and say, hey, do you want to watch today's video? Or rather yesterday's video, like, that's not super exciting. So I needed to make it a bit more interesting. I thought, well, okay, I can put a web page in that will look at what time of day it is when you open it and jump to that portion of yesterday's video to give you at least a bit of a feeling of watching it live. You're not actually watching what's happening right now. You're watching what was happening right now 24 hours ago. I also did a couple of other cool little things with the Birdbox. I'm not going to post any code at the moment. It's not finished, and also it's rough. I mean, I'm not doing this to share it, or at least I wasn't until someone said, hey, you're going to show us your stuff. I was just doing it for myself. It's commented, but it's commented for me. In fact, yes, here it is. There's a comment in here. I remember writing it. I think it must have been late one night, and the comment just says, remove carriage returns from the variable because they're sneaky and hidden, goddammit. So yeah, I did not write this for other people to see it, but I guess I'll end up tidying it up and sharing it. And if nothing else, you'll be able to see how I did it and do a better job. So the first script I have runs as a cron job once every 60 seconds, which is as often as I can run it. I probably run it once every 30 seconds, but I don't have to, I guess. And all it does is check to see if my main recording script is running, and if it isn't, then run it. There are many exciting ways of doing this. I know that there are different services and scripts and programs and things whose sole job is to keep things running. But instead of faffing about with any of that, I just looked for the process ID of my script, and if there wasn't one, I knew it wasn't running. Does the job. The main recording script does a few things. There is an endless loop in which we grab how many milliseconds there are until midnight and find out how long it's been since midnight and what today's date is and such, and a few other bits and bobs to do the job right. And it feeds it into RasPi vid, which records the video with the file name being today's date and also how many files we have so far so that we can increment them if we need more than one file. And then also, to make it unique, at the end of the file it has a number which is how many seconds it's been since midnight. And then RasPi vid is told how many milliseconds it should record for, and that is how many milliseconds it is until midnight. I will tell you that it has some drift. If you run RasPi vid at midnight and tell it to record until the next midnight, or for that many milliseconds, it tends to go over by a minute or 2 minutes. So it's not perfect, but close enough is fine. I had to play about with the settings to get them just right for the Birdbox. I had to set metering to matrix rather than the default of spot, because the bottom of the Birdbox is quite shiny and the IR LEDs were acting as just spotlights reflecting back, so that was crazy. And I had to set the exposure myself and also turn off the auto white balance because it was doing crazy things, making the image seem very red and very blue and so on. So I had to manually set that. And instead of setting a bitrate, I used the quantization -QP setting, as well as playing around with the keyframes. I think I set it to 1 keyframe every 2 seconds, which I think is actually the default, but it's nice to have it in there, I guess, to remind me, if nothing else, of what we're actually doing. And I put a little annotation up. It's a shame that RasPi Vid can't do the same as Python's PyCamera, is that what it's called in Python? For cool stuff like annotation. You can basically throw up the dates and the time and such, and whatever text you want, but you can't update it. Originally I was pulling temperature values, and I was using a command line weather app to pull like current temperature readings from a nearby weather station, and I wanted to overlay that kind of stuff, which I can do with still images, of course. And I wanted to overlay like system uptime and bits and bobs, just cool little stuff, but I couldn't do that in the end. So it's just going to be the URL for the site, which isn't up yet, and the date and time. So when RasPi Vid has stopped recording, it checks to see whether the date has changed. We don't care about specifics here, but I guess this will be somewhere where my script might potentially fall down if the Pi rebooted, because it doesn't have a real-time clock. It's always pulling the time from the internet. I suppose if the Pi rebooted and if the internet was down, it would set the date to 1970, and so this would be broken, because all I've got is an if statement that says, is today's date the same as it was when we started? And if it's not, then we assume that it's past midnight, and we run all of our processing scripts to process the video, and we move that off, and then we just loop back round and start recording again. We pretty much never stop recording. And my third and final script that we run to process the video, if we've figured out that it's the next day, is the longest and most convoluted, and I'm probably going to get lost in it here, but it does all the interesting stuff. The first thing we do is find out which video we're going to process. So in my recording script, I saved the current date to a temp file somewhere. So we pull the current date out of that temp file and use that, so we know, okay, we're processing these files and only these files, just in case there are other dates in there for whatever reason. Then we use a for loop and MP4 box to throw these files into an MP4, because RasPi Vid records in H.264 without any kind of frame rate information stored. So I'm recording at 18 FPS. I find that to be good enough. You get good, solid, perfectly acceptable video, but you're saving file size a little bit. However, there's no information stored in the file about what your frame rate is, or at least not that I know of. So you have to throw it through something like MP4 box, which just says, okay, this is 18 FPS, shove it in an MP4. And so I'm concatenating the files with 18 FPS in MP4 box. I'm also doing it with a dash flat, because otherwise, and I'm not sure why I'm specifying a temp folder here. That might be a requirement, but basically there's not enough RAM on the Pi to process really large files in the RAM and then spit them out to file. So if you go look at the man page for MP4 box, you'll see if you tell it to process it in a flat manner, it will write directly to file, which is what you want. Now once we've done that, I have a little for loop that does the same thing again, but there's a reason for this. If my other script dies and it starts recording another video, you can have multiple files that all have to be thrown into this one MP4, which is why it's in a loop there and not just processing a single file. And I wanted a way of checking to see, did that process work? And there aren't many ways of doing it, and even this isn't a particularly good way, because if the process failed once, it's possible it'll fail again. I can't think of any really good way to check, but what this next bit does basically is it takes all of the recordings, which theoretically should just be one unless there's been a problem, and it runs them through MP4Box again, but this time it just outputs it to dev null. It's just the file's going nowhere. What we're really interested in is seeing how many frames were in that file, which is something MP4Box can tell us. Annoyingly, if you just throw the output of MP4Box out to a file or something, it's the video file. That's what you're outputting. But I wanted to see what was coming out in the terminal in front of my face. So I used a program called Script, which is an awful name for a program. How the hell do you look up anything about Script online? You type in what? Linux Script? You see the problem? But it's a great program called Script where you can basically run whatever you like and have it output the output to a text file, as in the output of what you read on the screen, all logged nicely to a text file. So I did that, and then I pulled the total number of frames out with that, with cut tail head and such. And then I compared that total to the main file, and if they were the same, then that was fine. And just in case it loses a couple of frames now and then, I'm letting about 2 minutes worth of frames go. Like, I'm saying, like, look, if you've lost 2 minutes, fine, whatever. It never has, it's always been perfect, but there's still the possibility that if there's an issue there, if a file is simply corrupt, it's going to be corrupt the next time you try it anyway. But at least we're checking the frame totals of each of the files individually. It's the best I can think of. Next, we take that completed MP4 file, which should be 24 hours long, and we upload it to YouTube using YouTube-upload, which you can find on GitHub. I forget who makes it now. Damn, I don't remember which one I'm using. But it's a lovely, lovely, simple thing. And when I used it at first, I was planning on just uploading a 24-hour video. I've seen plenty of 24-hour videos on YouTube. Turns out they don't allow you to upload 24-hour videos anymore. The limit now is 11 hours max. And that's assuming you have an account that's authorized to upload more than 15 minutes, which is a case of sending a text message to your phone. It's not very difficult. But 11 hours was the cap, so I can't even upload 2 12-hour videos. So I decided to split them into 4 6-hour videos instead. And thankfully, YouTube Upload comes with a little FFmpeg script that will just split your video up. It splits it by default into 15 minutes, but you can just go into the script and change it to whatever. So I changed it to 6 hours. And conveniently, if you name your files correctly, which of course their splitting script does, it will recognize the 4 files that you feed in the same go as being 4 parts of the same thing, and it will append to the title of your video in brackets 1 of 4 or 1 of 5 or whatever it happens to be. So real nice, real convenient. YouTube Upload, you'll see if you look it up, but you can set all kinds of stuff. Basically what you can do with a normal YouTube video. You can make it private or unlisted. You can change the description. I believe you can put it in categories and playlists and so on and so forth. So once we've uploaded the files, the script will spit out the YouTube URL as well as the video ID. So that's what I'm eventually going to be feeding into my web end of things so it knows what the heck's going on. And then we just delete those part files. We don't need those 6-hour chunks anymore. I did notice, because of RasPi Vid's inability to stick to a timescale, that sometimes it was producing part 5 because it was recording more than 24 hours of video. So I'm not uploading part 5, and I just have a bit in the script that says delete part 5 and part 6. There'll never be a part 6, but hell, what's it going to do? Say there's no file with this name? That's fine. If there is a file with that name, get rid of it. Next, I still wanted to have still images. Oh, I see what I did there. I still wanted to have stills on the web page. I still want people to be able to go on there and see snapshot images, just still JPEGs, without having to load YouTube videos and watch videos. So I've got FFmpeg pulling 1 frame every 60 seconds of video out, and saving them in a snapshots directory, which is very useful actually, because watching 24 hours of footage to try and find something that you might find interesting is kind of impossible. Even flicking through it, you can end up just skipping whole minutes and missing whatever the action is. At the moment, we don't have birds living in the box. For the past couple of mornings, they've been visiting for 5 minutes or so in the morning. And you could watch the whole day's worth of video and catch that, but it would be better to have something that would catch that for you. So having these snapshots being saved once a minute is useful, both because you can go through them manually, but as I say, I like to leave the box to do things itself, and also I want to make this stuff easy for my mother and father to look at conveniently, and I'd basically love to have the script automatically pull interesting images out of those 1,440 images that it is pulling every day. So I took a script that I found online, and let me just find it here so I can say what it is. It's on imagemagick.org, and it's, can never tell with lowercase, I think it's L Whistler posted a script on their forums. Basically, their script takes an image as a reference and compares it to another image and outputs a mask file, a black and white image, where the black areas mean there's no change and the white areas mean something has changed here. Now, black in these images doesn't use up a lot in the way of file space, so a completely black image might only be 1-2 kilobytes. Whereas an image with a lot of white going on might be several times that. It might be 10 or 20 kilobytes even, depending on what's going on. So that gives us a jumping off point to figure out which of these 1,400 odd images might actually be interesting. So I looked at his script and I basically just used that with a couple of changes. His script uses a single reference image, which is probably useful for whatever he was responding to in that topic. And I tried it that way at first. I looked at the average file size in the folder, taking out the 10% largest and smallest in case they skewed the results, and I used that as the reference image, but that didn't work out because the sun shines in the box at certain times during the day through the hole, it's just the way it is in the sky. And it kept pulling those images and saying, those are interesting, and like, no, they're not. So instead, the script looks in those snapshots and it compares every image to the previous image and generates a mask from that. And that's how we are keeping it kind of sane, because it's like any regular motion detection system. Basically, you're looking at the previous thing and then the next thing and seeing if there's a big difference, as opposed to just looking at a single file. So it generates masks for all of those, and then it figures out what the average file size of the masks is. And I believe, I'm still cutting off the top 25% and bottom 25% to get, I think the term is interquartile mean, I think. It's been a long time since high school maths, but I think that's what it's called. And wow, back then I thought, that'll never be useful. When will I use that? But hey, programming a bird box. So I'm pulling an average file size of the masks, and I'm looking at, let's see, so I'm pulling the average file size, and yes, here's the number. I had to tweak it to get it how I like it, and it might not be perfect. It's worked very well today. I'm looking at all of the files that are 220% larger than the average mask size, so something significant is going on in them basically. And for yesterday's footage, which it ran at midnight, because all of this processing runs at midnight, of course, it produced the images with the birds. Slight downside is the images without the birds that come directly after the images with the birds are flagged as being interesting because, well, the previous image had a bird in it and this one doesn't, so that's interesting, right? There's a bit of a downside there, but it works. It pulls the most interesting images. And that's pretty much it. The most interesting images currently go onto a Dropbox using, I think it's probably just called Dropbox-uploader. Yeah, Dropbox-uploader, which again is another really great script that just lets you upload to Dropbox. What do you know? And so I do that so that my mum can look at Dropbox on her phone and see, oh, okay, there's some pictures of some birds. I should check it out or whatever. But at some point, those will go into a separate section on the website so that you can go on the website and see, hey, here's a couple of images from this day that are probably interesting to some passerby. And finally, for my mother to scan through manually if she wants to, which she probably will, I just produce a montage video of those 1,400 odd pictures at 2 frames a second. I think it's 12 minutes long, but it's all 24 hours of, 1 minute chunks for her or whoever to just watch through and use their own human eyes to identify things that they think are interesting. And then we move the original H.264 files off to be archived somewhere, and we delete the MP4 and we also delete the snapshots that aren't interesting, because we could repeat this entire process. We still have the H.264 file. If the MP4 didn't produce properly for some reason, or if the snapshots didn't come out properly, whatever, we still got that file. We could still process it again and pull snapshots again. So all we really want to keep are the handful of interesting images, which I suppose when the birds move in and there's a lot more movement, a lot of those images will become interesting. But again, I'll want to keep those. And I'll want to make those visible. And I've not written this part of the script yet, but I'll just have something to tidy the files up. Like once disk space goes down below 15% or something, and considering these files aren't all that huge, that's decent, then it will delete the oldest one, So you've got a running list of files, and if there's an issue, you can always grab the last however many. And that's the thing with file size. I really had to tweak it because I can record in full RasPi vid quality. You might think, well, you're not streaming anymore, so you've got, plenty of time to upload a video. Well, no, I've only got 24 hours, at which point I have to start producing the next video. And I was finding with like full bit rates and excellent image quality that it was taking more than 24 hours to process the previous video, which was awful. So the way it's set up now, everything should be done before anyone gets up in the morning. It might take a few hours to process everything. For example, the image mask script that produces interesting images takes about 45 minutes to run. So this stuff takes a while. The slight upshot is the Pi gets a bit warmer when it's doing this stuff. That, mixed with the really hot camera module itself, probably keeps the Birdbox a little bit warmer. I know heat rises and the circuitry's in the top of the box, but I like to think that it keeps the box at least a little bit warmer than nothing. Oh, one side note actually, the FFmpeg version that I've been using was one that someone compiled to work with streaming. I forget if the regular build of FFmpeg works nicely or not, but I grabbed this one. It worked nicely. I had no reason to muck about with anything else, and that's on a Google Drive somewhere. But I tested it working with YouTube and with Ustream, and actually that's not true. I tried streaming to YouTube and it was working. YouTube was saying like, yep, you've got a stream coming in, everything's all right, but it just wasn't streaming. It was the bizarrest thing. Worked perfectly with Twitch, worked perfectly with Ustream, but just YouTube wasn't having it. At the end of the day, it's not too hard to set up a Birdbox webcam, assuming you can build a Birdbox and put a Pi in there. And the other thing is, that Pi for most of the day isn't doing much. You might as well get it working on something else. And I'm not going to take that Pi out of the Birdbox now. It's in there. It's in there to stay. When the birds move out, I'll put the Pi back into take one picture a minute mode, and I'll just use it for something else. Most of the year we're not going to have birds in it, so there's a Pi set up in a Birdbox. Who cares where it is? As long as it's got an internet connection that's decent, it can do whatever the heck you want. It's a Pi. I have another Pi in the house which which my parents use as a desktop, and the screensaver shows still image JPEG webcams from around the world, which are quite hard to find nowadays because it's easy to steal them, and also people like live video now. But the Pi doesn't do so well with live flash video and stuff. Earthcam is just the worst because it doesn't play. It just doesn't play on the Pi. But I have it set up to pull the stills from the Birdbox when it's in just regular still image mode. So when there are no birds in there, when there's no need to upload videos every single day of nothing happening in the box, I'll just have it take some images, pop them on the website, and I'll just keep a general eye on it. You should have some fun as well looking at the temperature of the Pi. I've seen it when the temperature outside has been about -3. The Pi CPU in that particular box has gone down to 23 degrees, or was it 21? Between 21 and 23, I forget. That's Celsius, of course, which is cool in two ways. It may have taken a while to record this video, but it took a lot longer to do all of that other work. So hopefully I've somewhat condensed it down. And once I tidy up my code and once it's finished, because at the moment there's a couple of things that are important that it just doesn't do, I guess I'll share it. And you can play about with it or learn from it or whatever you like. I suppose I should have some kind of sign-off like, I'm Andrew, thanks for watching. That's what people say, right? On the YouTubes. I've been on the YouTubes, I know what it's like. On the YouTubes with the videos. On the YouTubes.